The twin sons of Cronus cast their amber light across the crystalline spires of Arcathon, capital world of the Arcas Empire. Emperor Thalassen Vex stood on the observation deck of the imperial palace, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the sprawling metropolis below. The city stretched to the horizon, its towers reaching toward the stars like the fingers of ancient gods. The Arcas had ruled the Cronus system for over 3 millennia, their empire spanning 7 worlds and countless orbital stations. They were a proud race, tall and graceful, with elongated limbs that spoke of their evolution under the lighter gravity of their homeworld. Their skin possessed a subtle luminescence that shifted with their emotions, and their large, multifaceted eyes could perceive light spectrums invisible to most other species. "Your Majesty," came a voice from behind him. Thalassen turned to see Admiral Xiphon Kresh, his oldest friend and most trusted military advisor. The Admiral's skin bore the deep blue hue that marked him as a veteran of countless campaigns, his scarred face testament to decades of service. "The morning reports, Admiral?" Thalassen asked, his voice carrying the melodic tones characteristic of his people. Production quotas exceeded on all mining worlds. The agricultural sectors report another bountiful harvest. The trade routes remain secure. Xiphon paused, his expression darkening. "But there are disturbing reports from our border reconnaissance stations." Thalassen's skin shifted to a pale gold, indicating concern. "The Dorcantos? Increase fleet movements. Our intelligence suggests they're massing forces in the Nexus Nebula. Ships we've never seen before, massive dreadnoughts that dwarf even our largest battlecruisers." The Emperor's expression hardened. The Dorcantos Empire had been their neighbors for centuries, occupying the systems beyond the void barrier. Relations had always been tense, but recent years had seen increasing hostility. The Dorcantos were a militaristic race, their society built around conquest and expansion. Where the Arcas valued art, science, and philosophy, the Dorcantos worshipped strength and viewed peace as weakness. "How long before they're ready to move?" Thalassen asked. "Our analysts estimate 3 standard months, perhaps less." A gentle chime echoed through the chamber, followed by the soft footsteps of the Emperor's personal guard. "Your Majesty," the guard announced, "the Empress requests your presence in the gardens." Thalassen's skin brightened to a warm amber at the mention of his wife. Empress Lyralii was carrying their first child, due within the next few weeks. After centuries of marriage, they had finally been blessed with the heir the Empire needed. "Continue monitoring the situation," Thalassen told his admiral. "Increase patrols along the border, but avoid any actions that might be seen as provocative. We cannot afford to give them an excuse to attack before we're ready." The Emperor made his way through the palace corridors, past ancient tapestries depicting the great victories of his ancestors. The Palace of Eternal Light had been built into the living rock of Mount Corvin, its rooms carved from single massive crystals that caught and refracted the light of the twin suns. It was said that no enemy had ever set foot within its walls. He found Lyralii in the meditation gardens, seated beside a fountain whose waters sang with engineered harmonics. Her pregnancy had enhanced her natural luminescence, giving her an almost ethereal beauty. She looked up as he approached, her large eyes reflecting the dancing light of the water. "My love," she said, rising gracefully despite her condition. "You look troubled." "The reports from the border grow more concerning each day," he admitted, taking her hands in his. "The Dorcantos are preparing for war." Lyralii's skin shifted to a deep purple, the color of worry. "What will we do?" "We will defend our people, as we always have. The Arcas have faced threats before and emerged stronger." He placed a gentle hand on her rounded belly. "Our child will be born into a free empire. I promise you that." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun crystals in the garden shift and dance in the breeze. Neither could have known that this would be their last moment of peace for years to come. 3 weeks later, the palace was in chaos. Empress Lyralii had given birth to a daughter, Princess Valera, whose birth had been celebrated throughout the empire. The child was healthy and strong, her skin already showing the iridescent quality that marked her as royalty. For a brief moment, joy had replaced the growing anxiety about the Dorcanos' threat. That joy was shattered when the emergency klaxons began to wail. Thalassen burst into command center, still wearing his ceremonial robes from the naming ceremony. The room was filled with a harsh red light of combat alert, and Admiral Xiphone's face was grim as he approached. "Report," the Emperor commanded. "Dorkando's fleet movements have accelerated. They have broken the non-aggression pact and crossed into the neutral zone. But that's not the worst of it." Xiphon activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of the system. 20 minutes ago, a small strike force penetrated our outer defenses. They targeted the Imperial Medical Facility on Chrono Station. Thalassen's skin went white with shock. The Empress and child were there for the princess's genetic screening. "We've lost contact with the station." The Emperor's legs nearly gave out beneath him. The medical facility was where all royal children underwent their first health evaluations, a tradition dating back millennia. It was supposed to be one of the most secure locations in the Empire. "Deploy the 7th Fleet immediately," Thalassen ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "I want that station back." "My lord," Xiphon hesitated. "The station's defenses have been destroyed. Long-range sensors show no life signs." Then we searched the debris field. We find them. 6 hours later, the rescue fleet arrived at Chrono Station to find a field of twisted metal and frozen atmosphere. The medical facility had been completely destroyed, but the pattern of destruction was wrong. Instead of the devastating beam weapons the Dorkandos typically employed, the damage appeared to have been caused by precise demolition charges. "They weren't trying to destroy the station," reported Captain Nixian from the lead rescue ship. "They were trying to extract something from it." Thalassen, who had insisted on leading the search personally, studied the tactical display. His worst fears were confirmed when the search teams found the remains of the Imperial Guard detachment. Every soldier had been killed by Dorkando's energy weapons, but the bodies were arranged in a defensive pattern around the medical wing. "They fought to the last," Admiral Xiphon observed, "but they were overwhelmed. Have we found any trace of the Empress and Princess?" Thalassen asked, though he already knew the answer from the silence that followed. "No, Your Majesty. No bodies, no trace of them anywhere in the debris." The Emperor's skin shifted through a spectrum of colors as emotions warred within him. Grief, rage, determination. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "They're alive. The Dorkandos took them." He turned to face his assembled officers. "Send a message to all fleet commanders. The Empire is now in a state of war. I want every ship, every weapon, every soldier prepared for battle. We're going to bring them home." The Great Hall of the Imperial Palace had been transformed into a war room. Holographic displays showed the positions of every Arcus ship in the fleet, while massive screens displayed intelligence reports from across the Empire. The circular chamber, normally used for state ceremonies, now buzzed with the activity of military commanders and civilian leaders working to prepare for the largest conflict in Arcus history. Emperor Thalassen sat at the center of it all, his ceremonial robes replaced by the practical attire of a military leader. Around him stood the Empire's most brilliant minds: Admiral Xiphon, Fleet Commander Nexus Tay, Intelligence Director Keelara Voss, and Chief Science Officer Reagan Moore. "What do we know about their capabilities?" Thalassen asked, his voice carrying none of the emotional turmoil he felt inside. Director Voss, a slight woman whose pale skin marked her as one of the deep space-born, activated her display. "Our intelligence suggests the Dorkandos have been preparing for this war for decades. They've developed new weapons technology, including some kind of energy-dampening field that can disable our shields. Our ships have advantages in speed and maneuverability," added Commander Tay. "But their new dreadnoughts outgun us 3-1. Then we don't fight them ship to ship," Thalassen decided. "We use our advantages. Fast strikes, hit-and-run tactics, force them to spread their fleet thin." Chief Science Officer Moore, whose ancient face bore the wisdom of 5 centuries, leaned forward. "Your Majesty, our scientists have been developing a new weapon system. Project Starfall. It's still experimental, but it could change the balance of power." "Explain." "A quantum torpedo that can phase through conventional shields. The problem is that it requires an enormous amount of energy to produce, and we've only been able to create a handful of prototypes." Admiral Xiphon studied the technical specifications. These could take out their dreadnoughts, but we'd need to get close enough to use them. "Leave that to me," said a new voice from the chamber entrance. All eyes turned to see Commander Valenstryker, the Empire's most decorated fighter pilot. His skin bore the distinctive silver scarring of radiation exposure, earned during heroic action at the Battle of Procyon. "I've been analyzing their fleet formations," Valen continued. "Their dreadnoughts are powerful, but they're slow and require escort vessels. If we can draw away their fighters, a small strike team could penetrate their defenses." Thalison nodded approvingly. "How many ships would you need?" "Give me a squadron of our best pilots and the fastest ships in the fleet. We'll get your quantum torpedoes to their targets." "Consider it done." The Emperor turned to address the full assembly. "Every moment we delay, the Empress and Princess are in greater danger. The Dorcandos think they can break our spirit by taking our loved ones. They're wrong. We will show them the fury of the Arca's empire." A cheer went up from the assembled officers, but Thalison's thoughts were elsewhere. In the quiet moments between planning sessions, he found himself imagining Lyreliai's face, wondering she was hurt, if baby Valero was safe. The not knowing was almost worse than the anger. "Sir," Director Voss approached him as the meeting broke up. "We've intercepted a transmission from the Dorcando's homeworld. It's addressed to you personally." Thalison's skin darkened to a deep crimson. "Show me." The holographic display activated, revealing the grotesque form of Supreme General Vorthan, leader of the Dorcantos military. The alien's 6 arms were spread wide in a gesture of mock welcome, his bulbous head crowned with the bone spikes that marked him as a member of the warrior caste. Emperor Thalison of the weakling Arcas, Vorthan's voice was like grinding stone. "By now you have discovered the absence of your mate and spawn. They are safe, for now, and will remain so as long as you meet our demands." Thalison's hands clenched into fists as the message continued. "You will surrender your fleet and submit to Dorcanto's rule. You will order your people to lay down their arms and accept their fate as slaves. You have 72 hours to comply, or the Empress and your precious heir will be executed in the traditional Dorcanto's manner." The transmission ended with images of Dorcanto's execution chambers, their blood-stained walls speaking of countless victims. Thalison stared at the display for a long moment, his skin cycling through colors of rage and grief. "Your Majesty?" Admiral Xiphon asked softly. "Send a reply," Thalison said, his voice deadly calm. "Tell General Vorthan that he has awakened a sleeping giant. The Arca's empire does not negotiate with kidnappers and murderers. We will come for our people, and we will make the Dorcantos pay for every moment of suffering they have caused." The orbital shipyards of Kronos Prime had never seen such activity. Thousands of vessels filled the space around the planet, from massive battlecruisers to the smallest scout ships. The Arca's empire was mobilizing its entire fleet, calling in ships from every corner of their territory. Emperor Thalison stood on the bridge of the flagship Radiant Dawn, watching as the last of the reinforcements arrived. The ship was a marvel of Arca's engineering, its crystalline hull gleaming like a jewel against the star field. Its weapon systems could level a city, yet it moved with the grace of a dancer through space. "Final count, Admiral?" Thalison asked. 2,437 ships, Your Majesty. Every vessel that can fly and fight." Xiphon's skin was a deep blue of satisfaction. "It's the largest fleet in our history." "And the Dorcantos?" "Intelligence estimates approximately 1,500 ships, but theirs are larger and more heavily armed. Their fleet is concentrated in the Nexus Nebula, using the gas clouds as cover." Thalison studied the tactical display. The Nexus Nebula was a massive cloud of ionized gas that interfered with sensors and communications. It was a perfect place for an ambush, but it also limited visibility for both sides. "Commander Stryker," he addressed the pilot, who stood at the tactical station, "are your strike teams ready?" "All 12 squadrons are armed with the quantum torpedoes, Your Majesty. We're ready to begin the operation." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. The main fleet would engage the Dorcanos forces in open battle, drawing their attention and forcing them to commit their reserves. Meanwhile, strike teams would use the chaos to infiltrate their rear lines and target their command ships. The hope was that by eliminating their leadership, the Dorcantos fleet would become disorganized and vulnerable. All ships, this is Emperor Thalison, he spoke into the fleet-wide communication system. Today we fight not just for our empire, but for our families, our children, and our future. The Dorcantos have taken what is most precious to us, believing that we will bow to their demands. They are wrong. We are the children of the stars, and we will not be made slaves. The response from the fleet was immediate and overwhelming. Ship after ship acknowledged the order, their captains pledging their lives to the cause. Thalison felt a surge of pride in his people, even as his heart ached for his missing wife and daughter. Fleet Command, this is Radiant Dawn, he continued. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination, Nexus Nebula. Today we go to war. The transition to hyperspace was a beautiful sight. One by one, the ships of the Arcus fleet stretched and disappeared into the swirling vortex of faster-than-light travel. The Radiant Dawn was the last to jump, its departure marked by a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from the surface of Kronos Prime. The Nexus Nebula was a realm of perpetual twilight, where massive gas clouds swirled in patterns that defied comprehension. Lightning arced between the ionized particles, creating a light show that was both beautiful and deadly. The Arcus fleet emerged from hyperspace at the nebula's edge, their sensors immediately hampered by the electromagnetic interference. Sensor range limited to 50,000 kilometers, reported the navigation officer. Communications are spotty at best. That works both ways, Admiral Xiphon observed. They can't see us any better than we can see them. Emperor Thalison nodded, but his attention was focused on the tactical display. Somewhere in this maze of gas and lightning, his wife and daughter were being held prisoner. The thought filled him with a cold fury that he channeled into absolute determination. All ships, maintain formation. Proceed into the nebula at 1/4 impulse. Combat patrols, launch. The fleet moved forward like a glowing constellation, their hulls reflecting the nebula's strange light. Fighter squadrons spread out ahead of the main force, their pilots straining to see through the electrical storms that raged around them. It was Fighter Squadron 7 that made first contact. Radiant Dawn, this is Falcon Leader, came the crackling transmission. We have enemy contacts. Bearing 27 Mark IV. Count 30, no, 40 ships. They're big ones. Visual confirmation? Thalison asked. Affirmative. Dorcantos battle cruisers, moving in attack formation. They're heading straight for us. The Emperor exchanged glances with his admiral. It's a probe. They're testing our strength. Orders, sir. Falcon Squadron, maintain observation. Do not engage. All ships, prepare for combat, but hold position. Let them come to us. The waiting was the hardest part. Through the nebula's swirling gases, they could see the approaching lights of the Dorcantos ships. The enemy vessels were massive, their hulls covered in the distinctive spikes and protrusions that marked their brutal aesthetic. Unlike the elegant curves of Arcus ships, these vessels were built for intimidation as much as warfare. Enemy ships entering weapons range, reported the tactical officer. All ships, stand by. Thalison's voice carried across the fleet. Remember, we have the advantage in maneuverability. Use it. The first salvo from the Dorcantos fleet lit up the nebula like a miniature sun. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked through the gas clouds, seeking Arcus targets. The return fire was immediate and devastating. The Radiant Dawn led the charge, its quantum cannons sending bolts of pure energy into the enemy formation. Direct hit on the lead cruiser, reported the weapons officer. Their shields are down. Finish them, Thalison commanded. The battle was joined in earnest now. Ships maneuvered through the nebula's twisting passages, exchanging fire at point-blank range. The Dorcantos vessels were powerful, but the Arcus ships were faster and more agile. Time and again, Arcus captains used their superior speed to outmaneuver their opponents, striking at weak points and withdrawing before the enemy could respond. But the cost was high. The Stellar Pride exploded in a brilliant fireball when a Dorcantos torpedo breached a reactor. The Moonbeam had her engines destroyed and was forced to withdraw. For every enemy ship destroyed, the Arcus lost one of their own. Sir, Admiral Xiphon reported, Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures deeper in the nebula. The main Dorcantos fleet is moving. Thalison studied the tactical display. The enemy probe had been defeated, but now they faced a real challenge. According to intelligence, the Dorcantos had over 1,000 ships waiting in the nebula's depths, including the massive dreadnoughts that no Arcus ship could face alone. "Commander Stryker," he called to the pilot, "are your strike teams ready?" "Standing by, Your Majesty." "Then it's time. Begin the infiltration. The rest of us will keep them busy." Commander Valen Stryker's ship, the Shadowblade, was a marvel of stealth technology. Its hull was coated with sensor-absorbing materials, and its engines were designed to produce minimal energy signatures. It was a perfect vessel for a suicide mission. "Strike Team Alpha, this is Shadow Leader." Valen spoke into his communicator. "We're approaching the target zone. Remember, we get one chance at this. Make it count." Behind him, 11 other ships followed in tight formation. Each carried a full complement of the experimental quantum torpedoes, weapons that could theoretically penetrate the Dorcanos' heavy shields. The problem was getting close enough to use them. The main battle was raging behind them, the sky lit by weapons fire and exploding ships. Emperor Thalison was leading the fleet in a desperate holding action, drawing the Dorcanos' forces away from their command ships. It was a brilliant strategy, but it couldn't last forever. "Sensors are picking up the enemy command group," reported his weapons officer. 3 dreadnoughts, escorted by 50 cruisers and destroyers. Valen studied the tactical display. The dreadnoughts were enormous, each one the size of a small city. Their weapons could obliterate an Arcus cruiser with a single shot, and their shields were reportedly impenetrable. But every ship had weak points, and the Dorcanos had a particular vulnerability. "There," he pointed to a spot on the largest dreadnought, the command tower. "It's protected by the main shields, but there's a gap in the coverage where the communication arrays are mounted." "That's a pretty narrow target," his pilot observed. "Then we'll have to be very accurate." Valen switched to the squadron frequency. "All ships, target the command tower of the lead dreadnought. We'll make our run from the port side, using the nebula's electrical storms as cover." The strike team moved through the gas clouds like ghosts, their ships barely visible against the swirling backdrop. The Dorcantos sensors were having difficulty penetrating the electromagnetic interference, giving the Arcus a crucial advantage. "Contact," whispered the sensor officer. "Enemy fighters, bearing 187 Mark 12. Valen could see them now. A squadron of Dorcanos interceptors, their ugly, utilitarian design standing out against the nebula's beauty. They were patrolling the perimeter of the command group, but their sensors were as limited as everyone else's. "Maintain course," he ordered. "We can slip past them." The Shadow Blade glided through the gas clouds, her crew holding their breath as they passed within a few hundred meters of the enemy patrol. The Dorcantos pilots never saw them, their attention focused on the distant battle. "Command group in sight," reported the tactical officer. The 3 dreadnoughts floated in formation like metal mountains, their massive hulls bristling with weapons. Around them, the escort ships maintained a defensive screen, their crews alert for any sign of attack. "Strike Team Alpha, this is Shadow Leader. Begin attack run. Target the command tower and fire on my mark." The 12 ships accelerated toward their target, their quantum torpedoes armed and ready. The lead dreadnought grew larger in their viewports, its command tower clearly visible atop the massive hull. "Incoming fire!" shouted the pilot. The Dorcantos had finally spotted them. Energy beams lanced through the gas clouds, seeking the attacking ships. The swift arrow exploded in a ball of fire, her crew dying instantly. The Night Hunter took a direct hit and spiraled out of control, her hull breached in a dozen places. "Hold formation," Valen commanded. "Almost there." The command tower was directly ahead now, its armored hull gleaming in the nebula's light. Valen could see the gap in the shield coverage, a narrow opening no more than 50 meters wide. "Fire!" 12 quantum torpedoes streaked toward the dreadnought, their exotic energy signatures invisible to conventional sensors. The first 11 struck the shields and were absorbed, their power dissipated harmlessly. But the 12th, fired from the Shadow Blade herself, found the gap. The explosion was magnificent. The quantum torpedo penetrated command tower's armor and detonated inside, its energy cascade destroying the ship's primary command systems. The massive dreadnought shuddered and began to list, its lights flickering as power systems failed. "Direct hit!" shouted the weapons officer. The command ship is disabled, but their celebration was short-lived. The other two dreadnoughts had turned their attention to the strike team, and their weapons were devastating. The Star Dancer was vaporized by a plasma cannon, while the Wind Walker was torn apart by a barrage of energy bolts. "All ships withdraw," Valen ordered. Mission accomplished. The surviving ships of Strike Team Alpha fled to the nebula, pursued by waves of Dorcanto's fighters. They had succeeded in their mission, but the cost had been terrible. Of the 12 ships that had begun the attack, only 5 remained. The destruction of the Dorcanto's command ship sent shockwaves through their fleet. Without central coordination, the individual ship commanders began to act independently, their formation breaking down into chaos. Emperor Thalison saw the opportunity and seized it. "All ships, advance," he commanded. "Press the attack." The Arcus fleet surged forward, their ships moving with renewed purpose. The Radiant Dawn led the charge, her quantum cannons blazing as she targeted the confused Dorcanto's vessels. Ship after ship fell to the coordinated assault, their crews unable to respond effectively without leadership. "Sir," Admiral Xiphon reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the surviving dreadnought. It's General Vorthen himself." The holographic display activated, showing the grotesque form of the Dorcanto's leader. His 6 arms were spread wide in fury, and his bone spikes were extended in a gesture threat. "Emperor Thalison." Vorthen's voice was filled with rage. "You dare attack my ships? You will pay for this insolence." "Where's my wife, Vorthen?" Thalison's voice was calm, but his skin had shifted to a deep crimson of barely controlled anger. "Where is my daughter?" "Safe for now, but their lives hang by a thread. Surrender now, and I might allow them to live as slaves." "Counter-proposal," Thalison replied. "Release them unharmed, and I might allow you to live." Vorthen's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass. "You are outnumbered, Emperor. Even without my command ship, I still have more firepower than your entire fleet." "Then why are you running?" It was true. The Dorcanto's fleet was withdrawing deeper into the nebula, their ships moving away from the battle zone. But Thalison knew it was a retreat. It was a trap. "Admiral," he said quietly, "they're leading us into the nebula's core. The electromagnetic interference will be at maximum there." "A perfect place for an ambush," Xiphon agreed. "Orders." Thalison studied the tactical display. The nebula's core was a region of intense electrical activity, where sensors would be useless and communications impossible. It was the last place any sane commander would want to fight a battle. "We follow them," he decided, "but we go in prepared." "Sir, deploy the sensor drones. I want them spread throughout the nebula, creating a communications network. And signal the reserve fleet. It's time to bring them into the battle." The reserve fleet consisted of 200 ships that had been held back at the nebula's edge. They were mostly smaller vessels, destroyers, cruisers, and frigates, but they were fresh and their crews were eager for battle. "All ships, advance into the nebula core," Thalison commanded. "Stay alert. This is where the real fight begins." The Arcus fleet moved deeper into the Nexus Nebula, their ships disappearing into the swirling mass of gas and lightning. The sensor drones followed, creating a tenuous network of communication relays that would allow the fleet to coordinate their actions. The ambush came without warning. Dorcanto's ships emerged from the gas clouds like predators, their weapons blazing. The enemy had been waiting, hidden in the nebula's electrical storms where sensors couldn't detect them. The attack was perfectly coordinated, striking at the Arcus fleet from multiple directions. "Evasive maneuvers," Thalison shouted. "All ships, scatter and reform." The Radiant Dawn twisted through the gas clouds, her pilot using every trick he knew to avoid the enemy fire. Around them, the battle raged with unprecedented fury. Ships exploded in brilliant fireballs, their deaths lighting up the nebula like fireworks. "Damage report," the Emperor called out. "Shields at 60%, reported the tactical officer. Hull breach on Deck 7. We've lost contact with the Morning Star and the Celestial Grace. The battle was not going well. The Dorcantos had chosen their ambush site perfectly, using the nebula's interference to mask their positions while launching devastating attacks. The Arca's fleet was being torn apart. Sir, Admiral Xiphon's voice was grim. We're losing too many ships. We need to withdraw. No, Thalison said firmly. My wife and daughter are somewhere in this nebula. We don't leave without them. It was then that salvation came from an unexpected source. The sensor network that had been deployed throughout the nebula began to pick up a signal, faint but unmistakably Arca's in origin. Your Majesty, the communications officer reported excitedly. We're receiving a transmission. It's the Empress. The transmission was weak and broken, filtered through layers of electromagnetic interference, but the voice was unmistakably that of Empress Lyrelii. Emperor Thalison felt his heart leap as her words reached him across the void. Thalison, if you can hear this, we are alive. Valera is safe. They're holding us on a prison ship. Coordinates follow. The signal dissolved into static, but the communications officer had managed to track its origin, a location deep within the nebula's core, where the electrical storms were at their most intense. It's a trap, Admiral Xiphon said immediately. They're using the Empress as bait. Of course it's a trap, Thalison replied. But we're going anyway. The Emperor studied the tactical display. The coordinates put the prison ship at the heart of the nebula, surrounded by the densest concentration of Dorcantos vessels. Getting there would require fighting through the entire enemy fleet. Commander Stryker, he called to the pilot. How many ships do you have left? 4, including the Shadow Blade. But we're low on quantum torpedoes. It doesn't matter. I need you to create a diversion. Draw their attention away from the prison ship. With respect, Your Majesty, for ships won't last long against their entire fleet. Then we'll give you support. Thalison turned to his admiral. Deploy the reserve fleet. Full assault on the Dorcantos positions. Make them think we're trying to break through their lines. And the real rescue mission? Leave that to me. The plan was desperate, but it was their only chance. The reserve fleet would launch a massive attack on the Dorcantos positions, drawing their attention and forcing them to commit their ships to the battle. Meanwhile, a small team would slip through the chaos and reach the prison ship. I'm leading the rescue mission personally, Thalison announced. Sir, I can't allow that, Admiral Xiphon protested. If something happens to me, you'll continue to fight until every Dorcantos ship is destroyed. But I won't ask others to risk their lives and my family while I stay safe on the bridge. The Emperor's shuttle was a small, fast vessel designed for diplomatic missions. It had been modified with stealth technology and armed with the last remaining quantum torpedoes. Accompanying him were a dozen of his personal guard, elite soldiers who had sworn to protect the royal family with their lives. All ships, commence attack, Thalison ordered as his shuttle launched from the radiant dawn. For the Empire, the battle that followed was the most intense of the war. The Arca's reserve fleet charged into the Dorcantos positions with reckless courage, their ships blazing with weapons fire. The Stellar Phoenix rammed the Dorcantos cruiser, both ships exploding in a massive fireball. The Cosmic Dancer fought 3 enemy destroyers simultaneously, her crew performing miracles of gunnery and navigation. Commander Stryker's strike team added to chaos, their remaining ships darting through the Dorcantos formation like angry wasps. The Shadow Blade destroyed 2 enemy cruisers with her last quantum torpedoes before being forced to withdraw, her hull scarred by enemy fire. Through it all, Emperor Thalison's shuttle slipped through the battle unnoticed. The small vessel was nearly invisible against the nebula's swirling backdrop, and the electromagnetic interference masked its energy signature. They passed within meters of Dorcantos' warships, their crews too busy with the battle to notice one small shuttle. There, Thalison pointed to a massive vessel floating in the nebula's core. The prison ship. The vessel was unlike anything in the Dorcantos fleet, where their warships were angular and aggressive. This ship was designed for containment and control. Its hull was covered with sensor arrays and communication equipment, and its defensive systems were focused on keeping things in rather than out. How do we get aboard? asked Captain Tyros, leader of the guard detail. The same way they got my wife and daughter off Chrono Station, Thalison replied. We dock with their shuttle bay and walk in. The prison ship's defenses were minimal, a few automated turrets and a small garrison of guards. It was designed to hold prisoners, not to fight battles. The Emperor's shuttle approached from the ship's blind spot, using the nebula's interference to mask their approach. Docking bay ahead, reported the pilot. I can see Dorcanto's shuttles inside. Set us down next to them, and prepare for combat. The shuttle touched down in the prison ship's bay, its landing gear extending to grip the metal deck. The bay was dimly lit, filled with the industrial smell of recycled air and machine oil. Dorcanto's guards moved about their duties, unaware that their worst nightmare had just arrived. For the Empress, Captain Tyros whispered as he activated his weapon. The battle for the prison ship was brief but intense. The Dorcanto's guard were skilled fighters, but they were unprepared for the fury of the Arca's elite guard. Emperor Thalison led the charge, his ceremonial sword singing through the air as he cut down any who stood in his way. The detention level is 3 decks down, reported the squad's intelligence specialist. Heavy security, but nothing we can't handle. They fought their way through the ship's corridors, past holding cells filled with prisoners from a dozen different species. The Dorcantos had been busy, capturing and enslaving anyone who opposed their expansion. But Thalison had eyes only for one cell, one prisoner who meant more to him than life itself. Thalison. The voice came from behind a heavy security door at the end of the corridor. Empress Lyrelii stood at the energy barrier, baby Valera in her arms. Both looked tired but unharmed, and Thalison felt tears of relief streaming down his face. Stand back, he told his wife as Captain Tyros prepared the door charges. The explosion shattered the energy barrier, and Thalison rushed forward to embrace his family. For a moment, the war ceased to exist, and there was only the 3 of them, reunited at last. We have to go, Lyrelii said urgently. There are others, political prisoners, civilians. We can't leave them here. The shuttle can't carry everyone, Captain Tyros pointed out. Then we'll take their shuttles too, Thalison decided. Release all the prisoners. We're taking everyone home. The rescue of the Empress and Princess changed everything. Word of their safe return spread to the Arca's fleet like wildfire, and the effect on morale was immediate and dramatic. Ships that had been ready to retreat suddenly found new reserves of courage. Crews that had been fighting defensively now went on the attack with renewed vigor. But the war was far from over. General Vorthen's remaining forces still outnumbered the Arca's fleet, and the Dorcanto's leader was furious at the loss of his prize prisoners. He gathered his remaining ships for one final, desperate assault. All ships, form on the radiant dawn, Emperor Thalison commanded as he returned to the flagship. We end this today. The 2 fleets faced each other across the nebula's core, their weapons charged and ready. The Arca's forces had been reduced to fewer than 1,000 ships, while the Dorcantos still fielded over 800 vessels. The enemy had the advantage in firepower, but the Arcas had something more important. They were fighting for their freedom. Your Majesty, Admiral Xiphon reported. General Vorthen is requesting a parley. On screen, the holographic display activated, showing the Dorcanto's leader on the bridge of his flagship. His 6 arms were spread wide in a gesture of mock diplomacy, but his bone spikes were extended in barely controlled rage. Emperor Thalison. Vorthen's voice was filled with hatred. You have cost me greatly today. My command ship destroyed, my prisoners escaped. But I still have enough firepower to destroy your entire fleet. Then why haven't you? Thalison asked calmly. Because I am prepared to offer you one final chance. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. Continue to resist, and I will make your people suffer as no species has ever suffered. Thalison looked around the bridge at his officers, at the crew members who had followed him through the fires of war. Their faces showed exhaustion, fear, determination, and hope. They were ready to follow him to the end, whatever that might be. General Vorthen, he said finally, you made one fatal mistake. You believed that by taking my wife and daughter, you could break my spirit. Instead, you showed me what I'm truly fighting for. Not for territory or conquest, but for the right to live free. Pretty words, Emperor, But words will not save you from my guns. No, Thalison agreed, but they will. He gestured to the tactical display, where new contacts were appearing at the nebula's edge. Hundreds of ships, bearing the insignia of the Arca's empire, were emerging from hyperspace. The civilian fleet had arrived. Merchant ships, passenger liners, even mining vessels, all converted into makeshift warships. The citizens of the Empire have come to fight, Thalison announced. Every ship that could fly, every crew that could serve. You wanted to conquer the Arcas? You'll have to defeat every single one of us. Vorthen's expression changed from confidence to uncertainty. His fleet was powerful, but it was not prepared to face the entire population of the Arca's empire. The civilian ships were poorly armed and lightly armored, but there were thousands of them, and they were crewed by people who had nothing left to lose. This is madness, Vorthen snarled. You're sending civilians to die. I'm giving them the chance to live free, Thalison replied. Something you will never understand. The final battle began with a brilliance that outshone the nebula's electrical storms. The Arca's fleet, both military and civilian, charged into the Dorkando's positions with desperate courage. The stellar merchant rammed the Dorkando's destroyer, her crew dying as heroes. The passenger liner Cosmic Dream used her size to shield smaller ships from enemy fire, her hull absorbing dozens of hits before finally succumbing. But for every ship they lost, the Arcas took 2 or 3 Dorkando's vessels with them. The sheer number of attacking ships overwhelmed the enemy's ability to respond, and their formation began to collapse under the assault. Sir, Admiral Xiphon reported, Vorthen's flagship is trying to escape. They're heading for the nebula's edge. Not today, Thalison said grimly. All ships pursue. We end this now. The chase through the nebula was a running battle, with both sides exchanging fire as they raced through the gas clouds. The Dorkando's flagship was fast, but the Arca's ships were faster, and they slowly closed the distance. Weapons range, reported the tactical officer. Fire. The Radiant Dawn's quantum cannons blazed with pure energy, their bolts striking the enemy ship's shields with devastating effect. The Dorkando's flagship shuddered under the impact, its defensive systems failing one by one. Their shields are down, the weapons officer reported. Hull breach on multiple decks. Finish them. The final salvo from the Arca's fleet was a thing of beauty and terror. Hundreds of energy beams converged on the crippled Dorkando's flagship, tearing through its hull like paper. The explosion that followed was visible from the edge of the nebula, a brilliant star that burned briefly before fading into darkness. General Vorthen and his dreams of conquest died with his ship. 6 months after the Battle of the Nexus Nebula, Emperor Thalison stood once again on the observation deck of the Imperial Palace. The twin suns of Cronus cast their amber light across the rebuilt city, where new spires rose alongside the ancient ones. The Empire had survived, but it was forever changed. The casualty reports, Your Majesty, Admiral Xiphon said softly as he approached. His skin bore new scars from the final battle, testament to the price of victory. How many? Thalison asked, though he already knew the answer would be painful. 437 ships lost, including both military and civilian vessels. Over 200,000 casualties. Xiphon paused, but the Dorkando's empire is finished. Their survivors are scattered to the outer systems, and their military is broken beyond repair. Thalison nodded, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. Victory had come at a terrible cost, but it had come. The Empire was free, and his family was safe. That would have to be enough. And the prisoners we liberated safely returned to their homeworlds. Many of them want to establish formal alliances with the Empire. Word of what we did has spread throughout the galaxy. The sound of footsteps made both men turn. Empress Lyrillia approached, carrying Princess Valera in her arms. The child had grown in the months since the war's end, her iridescent skin already showing the intelligence that would one day make her a worthy heir to the throne. How are the negotiations proceeding? Lyrillia asked, settling beside her husband. Better than expected. The Galactic Council has agreed to establish a peacekeeping force to prevent future conflicts. The Dorkandos will never again be able to threaten innocent worlds. And what of us? What of the Empire? Thalison looked out at the city below, whereas people went about their lives in peace. Children played in the crystal gardens. Artists created works of beauty that would last for generations, and scientists pushed the boundaries of knowledge ever further. It was a civilization worth fighting for. "We rebuild," he said finally. "We remember those who died, and we honor their sacrifice by creating something better than what came before." Baby Valera gurgled softly, her large eyes reflecting the light of the twin suns. She was too young to understand the war that had shaped her birth, but she would grow up in a galaxy where freedom was valued above conquest, where different species could live together in peace. "She'll never know the fear we lived through," Lyrelii observed. "No," Thalison agreed, "but she'll know the stories. She'll understand that freedom is not free, that it must be defended by each generation." As if in response to her father's words, Princess Valera reached out toward the window, her tiny hand grasping at the light of the stars. In her eyes, Thalison saw the future of the Empire, a future where mistakes of the past would not be repeated, where war would be the last resort rather than the first. "Your Majesty," Admiral Xiphon said, "there's one more thing. The memorial service of the fallen is scheduled for tomorrow. Will you be speaking?" "Of course." Thalison's voice was firm. "They died for all of us. The least we can do is remember them." The Emperor took his wife's hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against his own. The war was over, but the peace they had won would require constant vigilance. New threats would emerge, new challenges would arise, but the Arca's Empire would face them as they always had, together. As the twin suns set over Arcathon, casting long shadows across the crystal spires, Emperor Thalison made a silent promise to his daughter and all the children of the Empire. They would never again face the darkness of tyranny. The light of freedom would burn eternal, a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had known too much war. The Cronus War was over. The age of peace had begun. 20 years later, Princess Valera stood in the same spot where her father had once watched the fleet depart for war. She was a woman now, trained in the arts of diplomacy and leadership, her skin bearing the deep blue of wisdom that came with age and experience. Around her, the Empire prospered as never before. The memorial garden stretched out below her, its crystal monuments honoring the brave souls who had died in the Nexus Nebula. Each name was inscribed in the ancient script of the Arcas, their stories preserved for future generations. Children from across the Empire came here to learn about the war, to understand the price of the freedom they enjoyed. "Your Highness," came a familiar voice. Admiral Xiphon, now elderly but still sharp, approached with a data pad in his hands. "The latest reports from the Galactic Council. The peacekeeping force has successfully mediated another dispute. The Rigel system has been stabilized." Valera smiled. The Galactic Council had grown from the ashes of the Dorkandos War, becoming a force for peace and cooperation throughout the galaxy. Her father's vision of a united galaxy where different species could coexist in harmony was slowly becoming reality. "Any word from the exploration fleets?" she asked. "The New Dawn has made contact with 3 new civilizations in the Andromeda sector. All peaceful, all interested in trade and cultural exchange." The age of exploration had begun shortly after the war's end. The same technologies that had created weapons of destruction were now used to build ships that could travel between the stars, seeking new worlds and new forms of life. The Empire had become a hub of scientific advancement and artistic achievement. "Father would be proud," Valera said softly. Emperor Thalison had passed away the previous year, his body worn out by the stresses of leadership and the weights of his decisions. But his legacy lived on in the peace he had created, in the freedom he had preserved, and in the daughter he had raised to continue his work. He would indeed, Admiral Xiphon agreed. The Empire has never been stronger or more prosperous, and the galaxy has never been more peaceful. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Princess Valera made her own silent promise. The peace her father had won would be preserved, the freedom he had fought for would be defended, and the light of civilization would continue to shine throughout the galaxy. The Cronus War had ended in victory, but more importantly, it had ended in hope. And hope, as any student of history knew, was the most powerful force in the universe. The story of the Arca's Empire continued, written in the stars themselves, a testament to the courage of those who stood against tyranny and the wisdom of those who chose peace over conquest. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.